An especially dramatic night took place in Tehran. Israel eliminated Ali Larijani, who was seen as Iran's de facto leader after Khamenei's assassination, and at the same time also terminated Basij commander Gholam Reza Soleimani and also his deputy. This was not just another strike on infrastructure and not just another symbolic message, but a focused move against the two most critical centers of power inside the regime: the man managing the decision-making and the man keeping the streets under fear. While Tehran loses in the same night both the man of leadership and the man of repression, the question is no longer only who was terminated, but whether Israel is trying to leave Iran without the ability to govern itself, to respond effectively, and to maintain a stable regime under fire. And not only that, now the war with Iran has reached space as well. Israel has destroyed Iran's military satellite center, and at the same time, the Iranian Navy has lost its head, and the sensitive Iranian headquarters has been destroyed. Israeli Air Force strikes in the heart of Tehran. In a precise wave of strikes in the heart of Tehran, the Israeli Air Force destroyed the Naval Command and Control Center responsible for attacks on the freedom of navigation and the smuggling of weapons to Hezbollah in Lebanon. Trump is preparing the ground for a deadly attack on Iran. Donald Trump said today, the war will end soon, but not this week. Iran wants to talk. And he added, I don't know who you can talk to in Iran because everyone there is dead. Members of the Revolutionary Guards are defecting. This could be the end of the Revolutionary Guards. Trump said the war will end soon, but not this week. Iran, they want to talk, but this is still not the time. The United States is currently refusing negotiations with Iran. They need more pounding, Trump responded. It appears that the American military is preparing the ground for another deadly strike on Iran. How did the United States and Israel manage to strike the Iranian regime from the top down to its foundations? Our senior Middle East analyst, Mati Shoshani, will walk us through the summary of the events up to this point today. And Trump's challenge, how to open the Strait of Hormuz before there is damage to the global economy. Why is Iran focusing its heavy attacks on the United Arab Emirates? And today, we will also bring you the answer to the question that shook the White House. Could Israel make use of nuclear weapons? I'm Yair Pinto, and with me is Mati Shoshani, and here we are boots on the ground that bring you the full truth about what is happening in Israel and everything that is heating up in the war against the Revolutionary Guards in Iran. We are opening day 18. Donald Trump announced that most of Iran's capabilities have been destroyed. Other than that, they are fine. Day 18 of the Lion's Roar, or Epic Fury, is in the Iran arena. The IDF continues striking the regime targets in an attempt to weaken and humiliate the Iranian regime. In a precise wave of strikes in Tehran, Shiraz, and Tabriz simultaneously, the Israeli Air Force left Iran in shock last night. And again, last night, the Israeli Air Force destroyed the Naval Command and the Control Center that is responsible for attacks on the freedom of navigation and the smuggling of weapons to Hezbollah. IDF spokesperson stated that we deepened the damage to the regime's ability to advance terror operations in the maritime domain. The headquarters served for years as a command center for activity in the naval arena and for managing sabotage operations against civilian ships and regional trade routes. The strike damaged its coordination and its command capabilities. In the IDF Intelligence Directorate, there are identifying cracks in the resilience of Iran's military and the Revolutionary Guards in the face of the attacks by the United States and by Israel. Basij personnel fled from the Air Force, and senior officials in the Revolutionary Guards are defecting. And there are reports in Tehran of IDF strikes against security checkpoints on major routes in the capital. Swarms of AI-guided drones continue to strike positions and street checkpoints of the Revolutionary Guards in Tehran in intense screening operations. At the moment, it appears that the senior command echelon from within the ranks of the Revolutionary Guards has completely defected. The IDF announced that we have struck more than 500 command and control targets of the Revolutionary Guards. It is important to understand that these are strikes that allow us to undermine the Iranian regime's ability to manage its attacks. Iran is once again activating its last remaining military power in a selective siege that blocks energy routes to the major economies in Europe and in Asia. This is a move that is shaking the markets around the world. Donald Trump is pressing NATO countries to establish a coalition to escort convoys, but they are afraid of being dragged into a war that the United States initiated, while the main beneficiary of rising the oil prices is actually Putin of Russia. Israel is providing intelligence for all the options that the United States is considering. And at the Pentagon, they are preparing an option to take control of Karag Island. The United States refuses negotiations with Iran. They need more pounding. Washington insists that Tehran fulfill all the conditions of surrender, handing over the enriched uranium, shutting down the nuclear facilities, stopping the missile project, and ending support for regional terrorist organizations. The President of the United States said that the United States attacked around 7,000 military and commercial targets in the Islamic Republic. The military and the leaders were destroyed, and together with Israel, we are doing what needs to be done. And later, in another statement, he said, I don't know who you can talk to in Iran, but everyone there is dead. The data showed that since the fighting began, Iran has launched 700 missiles at Israel. Only half of them arrived, and almost 85% were intercepted. Trump has been required to answer many questions about the war, but today, he was asked directly regarding Israel's use of nuclear weapons, and the answer was unequivocal. We have all the details coming up. Iran is firing cluster missiles at Israel with destruction radius of up to 10 square kilometers. The Iranian missile has become the biggest challenge for the IDF. The missiles with the splitting warheads have become the interception challenge for Israel's air defensive systems. A military source explains that intercepting the missile outside the atmosphere prevents the warhead from splitting up. Game of Thrones, Iran version. The New York Times is publishing details about the process of selecting Mujtaba Khamenei as Iran's supreme leader. Mujtaba probably would not have been chosen for the role if his father had died a natural death. His father opposed his selection and supported other candidates, but his assassination tipped the scales in favor of his son. And today, it was revealed how Mujtaba Khamenei survived that assassination. And yesterday, a recording surfaced in which a senior official in the office of the assassinated leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, is heard reporting to other senior officials on the results of the bombing the morning that the war began, in which Khamenei, the father, and many of the top ranks of the regime were terminated. He says that the heir, Mujtaba, survived only because he had gone out a few minutes earlier for a walk in the courtyard, and the missile struck exactly as he was going up the stairs. Meanwhile, in the fighting against Hezbollah in Lebanon, the IDF is pushing Hezbollah back beyond the Litani River. In recent days, the IDF has begun ground activity in Lebanon in order to expand the 4 defensive lines. This involves the destruction of the first row of houses. This is what IDF activity in Lebanon will look like. In Israel, they are planning to conduct negotiations with Lebanon while carrying out the demolition operation in order to pressure the Lebanese government to restrain Hezbollah. Residents of Lebanon have evacuated from the area near the border, and after the demolition operations are completed, Israeli forces will be positioned to defend against the terrorist organization. And the eyes are not only on Iran. What is happening in other arenas while Tehran is burning? Operation Lion's Roar is drawing attention away from the additional arenas that the IDF is dealing with, which are Lebanon, the Gaza Strip, the Houthis in Yemen, and also Judea and Samaria. And as of now, the IDF is maintaining all of the arenas with great successes. Today, we will also bring you what is happening with all the rest. There is a lot ahead of us, so let's dive into the details. The tension is rising in the Middle East minute by minute. And I'm Yair Pinto, and with me is Mati Shoshani. And here, we are boots on the ground that bring you the full truth about what is happening in Israel. And this day is day 18th of the war against the Revolutionary Guards in Iran, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. And just before we begin, I want to call on you to keep spreading the truth, share our content with as many people as possible. Click on the subscribe button, and most importantly, do not forget to look for me, Yair Pinto, and for Mati Shoshani on our social media platforms to get the perspective behind the scenes of what it's like to live in Israel under war. Our senior Middle East correspondent, Mati Shoshani, are you receiving me now?
I can hear you, Yair. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. So basically 2 weeks have passed since the operation began, a little more than that, and so much has happened here since then. I mean, can you give us an order of the central events, I think the main issues that passed in the last 2 weeks, and what do we have ahead of us in this campaign?
Yes, I think that's a great question. It's important to remember where we've come from and where we've gone. So we're 2 weeks and 2 days now, 3 days into this ongoing war, the second Iran war. This war too, just like in Operation Midnight Hammer in June of 2025, was opened with a surprise Israeli attack, joined later by an American attack. Back then it was over a week later. This time it was minutes later. The opening notes of this campaign were a strategic bombing of multiple facilities in Iran, radar systems, communication nodes, but most importantly, an underground bunker where the supreme leader of Iran, Ali Khamenei, was hiding well underground. It included a huge operation of counterintelligence to fool the Iranian regime into believing that Israel wasn't planning to attack that Saturday morning. And Ali Khamenei, together with close to 40 heads of both the Ayatollah regime and the IRGC, were removed in one fell swoop. That move was continued by days, we're talking almost an entire week, of ongoing bombardment by the American forces and the Israeli forces that eliminated much of the conventional fighting force of Iran. Much of the leadership, we're talking dozens of people in top leadership of every organization within the Iranian government, be they a religious figure, be they a IRGC, let's call it terrorism army, and be it a proper Iran army or the Basij, many of them have been removed. Their ships were sunk, their submarines were sunk, hundreds of their launchers were removed, hundreds of their ballistic missiles were blown up, many of their warehouses for mines, for other explosive charges, etc., were also destroyed, and much of their fighting force has been eliminated. And after about a week of that fight, we started transitioning into the second phase in retaliation to what Iran started doing, which was attacking the Gulf states. They launched ballistic missiles and suicide drones at almost every Gulf state around them with an attempt to really bring terror to those countries and force them or pressure them into ending the campaign. This war took a turn into a war that is more in a war of attrition. The Iranians trying to weaken, scare, hurt the neighboring countries, including Israel, launching ballistic missiles into Israel that for the most part have been intercepted, launching ballistic missiles and drones into the UAE, into Oman, into Qatar, into Kuwait, into Saudi Arabia, time and time again, and even launching ballistic missiles into NATO countries that were intercepted over Turkey, believe that. And to add to that, about a week into this campaign, the war takes another shift where it also started including Hezbollah in Lebanon. Hezbollah is a very diminished fighting force compared to what it was about 2 years ago, and yet IRGC officers have been there for several months now, waiting for this moment, and they too started attacking Israel, which culminated about a week into the war in a very substantial uptick in the amount of launches from Lebanon-controlled Hezbollah areas into the northern communities of Israel, up to over 100 a night in certain nights of this last weekend, about a week ago today, which was responded by a very substantial effort of the IDF that both took another line of defensive positions within Lebanon and is now in the point of, let's call it maneuvering in its early phases within Lebanon, including the large recruitment of IDF soldiers. To give you a story of what's happening in Israel, the Israeli country has responded as a very, very well-oiled machine to this war. Reservists were recruited, myself included, and a second wave of reservists has been recruited in this last week to prepare for the maneuver in Lebanon that is happening as we speak. The early phases of it, at least, are happening. The civilian population has been highly disciplined, and there's another big chunk outside of Israel, which is the economic response to what's been happening. The Iranians have been trying to put a financial pressure campaign in place by hurting the global economy, by raising the prices of oil, by closing the Straits of Hormuz, possibly even trying to lay sea mines, naval mines in the Straits of Hormuz, and threatening other countries that they won't be able to move their ships over there. And right now, the war that we're fighting is a war of financial attrition. Hezbollah is a big piece in that, but Israel's going to deal with Hezbollah directly. But when it comes to what's happening in Iran and off the coast of Iran, we're fighting a war where Israel and the United States more than Israel in this case, are trying to reinstate free travel through the Straits of Hormuz, which will allow about 20% of the world's oil, 20% of the world's liquid natural gas to travel through those straits to destinations around the world, bringing back down the cost of oil. One big thing has happened last night. We had, I said on the first day of this attack, a strike against much of the leadership of Iran, Ayatollah and IRGC leadership. And then just last night, a second very substantial wave of attacks that removed the person who was the effective number 2 in the Iranian government, possibly the one calling the shots in the last 2 weeks, Ali Larijani, who was the right hand of Khamenei. He was the person responsible for the foreign relationships with other countries. Very substantial strike that is worth going into in depth. But that's sort of a recap of everything that's happened in recent weeks.
Wow. Thanks, Mati. Yeah, definitely a lot have happened in the last few weeks. And I think that one point that I would like to go deeper on is the attacks against the Basij personnel, the Basij leadership, the checkpoints of this organization. Maybe you can start by explaining what is the Basij, what purpose do they serve for the Iranian regime, and then why it's so important to take them out, and what message does it send from Israel to the Iranian people?
Yeah, two substantial things have happened in recent days. One, just last night, Israel struck and eliminated 2 of the heads of the Basij. And what the Basij is, to your question, the Basij is the enforcer unit for the Iranian regime. If I had to equate them to a different unit in history, I'd equate them to the brown coats in Nazi Germany, pre-war Nazi Germany. They're the people who break up demonstrations. They're the people who beat up people who are counter-government within Iran. They're the people holding the roadblocks throughout the different neighborhoods of Tehran and other cities of Iran and preventing free passage of Iranian people. So if you look at who are the people on the ground, who are the boots on the ground that are scaring the population, that are hurting the population, that are enforcing the will of the Ayatollah regime, it's the Basij forces. And what Israel and the United States have been doing for about 5 days, 5-6 days now, is striking those roadblocks. We've been using autonomous drone swarms to eliminate some of them. I've even seen footage come out in the last 24 hours of sort of the gatherings of those Basij forces prepping for missions, being struck by missiles coming from the sky. Very dramatic footage that's coming out. And what this is again, is Israel together with the United States in a systematic manner breaking away the pieces of government that make up the Iranian regime. What's happened in recent days, aside from the Basij, is really, if you look underneath the next supreme leader, Mujtaba, if you look underneath him, they're eliminating the number 2s, 3s, and 4s. So whatever his situation is, whenever he comes out of hiding, be it alive or not, we're not sure what his situation is right now, but whenever that happens, whenever he materializes, there'll be no one to replace him. All those number 2s, all those number 3s, all those number 4s, head of Basij, head of the Iranian Security Council, Ali Larijani, was eliminated last night, and several others have been removed in the last week, which really weakens the command and control chain within Iran and their ability as a government to control the people. All of this is with the stated goal of prepping the ground for government replacement by the Iranian people, which has always been the stated goal of this campaign.
Yeah. And Mati, another big question, why are the Gulf states not attacking Iran back? I mean, what's the point? They've been under attack. Their economy is weakened. There are attacks against Google facilities, Amazon facilities in their state. I mean, don't they want to do something about it?
I imagine they do, Yael. I imagine they very much want to do something about it. I would say the key factor here is probably fear of retaliation. That is probably why they're not responding. I'll say there's a small asterisk. One of the Gulf states did respond, the United Arab Emirates, but it was a symbolic attack. But still, they responded with their head held high and not, in a what I would perceive as buckling under the threat or the fear of the Iranian regime. And I think this is really an interesting point here and an important point to note. There's been a lot of high talk, a lot of countries, thumping their chests and saying, we're coming after the Iranian regime, we're going to respond, we're going to retaliate. And in real time, nothing happens. Absolute crickets. You don't hear a single shot fired from those countries. They're counting on Israel. They're counting on the United States to be the people to do their dirty work. President Trump just yesterday in a press conference said the following words. He said, we need an international force to police the Strait of Hormuz. And then he looked around and he said, but since these countries are reluctant to do that, I'm paraphrasing, of course, we'll be fine. We're strong. We know how to fight. We already know what the reality is, Yael. These countries speak, they have no problem speaking, of making these, these bold statements and speeches. We'll stand up for our sovereignty. We'll fight for ourselves. And yet when the time comes to show what you're made of as a country, there's only two countries that in recent years have fought for other people's freedom and fought to bring the right government into Iran, and that's the United States and the small state of Israel. The Gulf states, including the Saudis, who have an immense air force that is equipped with the best of the American industrial complex, nothing, no response from them, even though they have the manpower, the munitions, and the money to fight back on this. They're waiting to see if someone else can solve the problem for them. I don't feel a need to mince words here. I don't feel like we need to be overly polite with these people. They've chosen to let other people fight their fight. That's the reality here. And I think they would have done better for themselves, even when it comes to their own public perception, to do something active such as the UAE did to really fight against the evil that is the Iranian regime. And they've, the Iranians have shown time and time again that they have absolutely no problem to punch holes in the defenses of their neighbors, to harm their infrastructure, to bring down their economy. And there should be a retaliation to that. That is a justifiable and reasonable action in anyone's mind. I think they're just afraid of what the response from the Ayatollah regime would be. And I think there's an underlying fear of maybe, just maybe, the Ayatollah regime isn't going to be gone after this round, and we'd rather be on their forgiving side and not their retaliatory side. I'd say that is a misunderstanding of how history works and how self-defense should work, but that's theirs to deal with. That's not on us.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that I know you well enough, Matti. I'm sure that since the last 3 days, the new weapon of the United States was revealed, the Leonidas. You've been researching a lot about it. Yeah. What can you tell our viewers and me also about this new technology that is called Leonidas, that the United States has been developing, this new electromagnetic pulse thing?
Yeah, thank you for asking, Neil. And yes, indeed, I have been deep in reading mode on this topic. You do know me quite well. It is an amazing system. It's not only developed, it has also been deployed in the Middle East. It is a counter drone and counter kinetic energy or kinetic projectile weapon that uses, let's call it a very sophisticated method of electromagnetic warfare to fry the electronics on board rockets, missiles, and specifically drones. One of the biggest threats of this campaign, and also the war, by the way, in Russia, and also any campaign elsewhere, is the development and the deployment of low-cost, highly effective drones. Some of them are this small, some of them are, let's say, 10, 15 feet, some of them are bigger than that. But what they do is they destroy the ships, the armored vehicles, and personnel anywhere in the battlefield without endangering the enemy's soldiers. And the US has deployed this new system that is now on the back of trucks or static, let's call it forward deployed systems. It's run by a generator, and it's able to knock out, and hear me when I say this, swarms of drones from the air at once. So it's not using a communication denial system such as other systems that are already deployed in the Israeli army. Traditional systems, what they do is they ride onto the communication channels, and then they replace them or deny communication from the operator to the drone. Or what they do is they feed in false information regarding altitude or inputs of control and cause the drone to crash. This does something entirely different. It uses a very sophisticated method of using electromagnetic pulses in various wavelengths to fry the electronics on board the drones, but it also works against different kind of projectiles, anything that has sensitive electronics. And what I'm told, and what I've seen in the public publications on this online, is it's not just small drones. Even, let's call it robust military platforms, drones that have protection against EMP pulses, drones that have protection against communication jamming, even what is being used in the Ukraine-Russia war right now, which is drones that are controlled by fiber optics, so there is no wireless signal to control, they too can be intercepted by this device called Leonidas, and there are smaller variants of it that can be put on a Jeep or soon even possibly deployed on other drones in the sky to knock them out of the air. Again, it's pinpoint, but it can do multiple targets at once, an absolute game changer. And let me add just one more piece into this puzzle, which is the US has also deployed drones as a new weapon in this conflict. Not big drones, not the multi-million-dollar drones, not the held hand drones, but they've reverse engineered the Shahed drone that the Iranians use. It was used first as a target drone to test American weapon systems. Now they reverse engineered it, improved it, made it lighter weight and more effective, and are using that as a drone to fight in the war against Iran. And what that does, it's the drone, by the way, is called the Lucas drone. It's about 10 feet in wingspan, relatively small, several hundred pounds when it takes off. Small warhead, but it's enough to exhaust the air defenses. It's enough to force Iranian radar systems and radar operators and their anti-aircraft batteries to exhaust all their missiles and bullets and explosive rounds at these small and cheap targets. Their cost is marginal in military speech. They're $35,000 a piece. Most military pieces of equipment are in the hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, definitely for an airborne platform. So again, you're seeing the American defense industry respond very, very, very quickly to this. We have friends in the Israeli industry. We know the same thing is happening within Israel. These wars are a trigger for rapid deployment and development of new weapon systems that really change the battlefield. They save lives, but they also save dollars. And again, when you're fighting a war of financial attrition, your cost of intercept and your cost of triggering the enemy's intercept is a very substantial thing. I want to add one last thought here, Yael. Everyone in the world is looking at this. You know, the Russians are looking at this. The Chinese are looking at this. The Indians are looking, and they want to see, wait a minute, how is this going to end for the United States? And how is this going to end for Israel? How is it going to end for the Iranians? What we've seen here is a US president, an Israeli prime minister, and leadership echelon in each one of these countries just do the absolute right thing. Take risks, take huge risks, in fact, act quickly, act swiftly, but also act with extreme prejudice against our enemies, as we should. And it's an example for everyone else around the world that if you mess with a wrong adversary, if you poke the American bear or poke the Israeli bear, you're going to pay for your miscalculation. And I think that's a really big takeaway from everything that's been happening.
Well, yeah, thank you very much, Mati. I think that we definitely need to do an explainer about these technologies in the coming days or weeks once we have all the concrete information about this. So thanks for joining us, Mati.
Thank you, Yael.
See you later. And to all of you that are watching from around the world, thank you. Thank you for standing with Israel by sharing the truth, sharing our videos with more people that want to know what's happening here, and by praying. So if you want to help us, it's very easy. You hit the subscribe button, you join the TBN Israel YouTube family, and you share these videos with as many people as possible so that they will know what's happening here on the ground. And if you want to see this war behind the scenes, you know, short clips, social media style, look for Yair Pinto and Mati Shoshani on our social media accounts, because Israel is under attack now, every single day. Sirens are sounding, missiles are falling, families are running to bomb shelters in the middle of the night. The world is watching the war unfold in the sky. But on the ground, another battle is happening quietly. A battle for food, a battle for dignity, a battle for survival. Because wars don't only happen on the front lines. They reach the kitchen table. The reservists of the IDF have been called away from their jobs, away from their families for months at a time. Imagine that. Small businesses collapse. Elderly people are afraid to leave their homes during the missile attacks. For many Israelis, the fridge is simply empty. At Meir Panim, we see it every single day. Holocaust survivors sitting alone in dark apartments, families of IDF soldiers trying to survive while a parent is fighting on the front lines. And while the world watches the missiles, we are watching the people. So every day, Meir Panim provides hot meals, food packages, and care for those who need it most. But we cannot do this alone. We need you to stand with Israel, with the people of Israel, with us. So if you want to bless Israel, help the Israelis in need during this war, go to bless-israel.org and make a donation. Again, that's bless-israel.org. Help feed the hidden victims of this war. You can do that by leaving a donation at bless-israel.org. Stand with Israel and the people of Israel today. A double assassination took place in the heart of Tehran. And once again, a direct blow to the exposed nerves of the Iranian regime. In the past few hours, the Israeli Air Force struck two of the most central figures that are still left alive in Tehran's leadership. Ali Larijani, who was widely seen as the man effectively holding the reins after the elimination of Ali Khamenei, and Basij commander Gholam Reza Soleimani, along with his deputy. This was no longer just another strike on the warehouse, no longer just another hit on infrastructure, and no longer just a general signal. This was a focused operation against the regime's decision-making center and against the repression mechanism that keeps the Iranian street under fear. And officially, he was a veteran regime figure, a man who knew every power center, every internal rivalry, and every sensitive junction inside the Iranian system. And according to reports, he was not operating from any formal office and was not moving publicly. He had been shifting between safe houses, hidden in the regime's security apparatus, trying to keep managing the system from the shadows, but the Israeli intelligence succeeded in locating him, closing the circle, and carrying out a precise strike in the heart of the capital, Tehran. The meaning of this assassination is extremely significant. Larijani was the man who connected the leadership, the security apparatus, and the decision-making processes during wartime. That is why eliminating him is not just a blow to the senior figure, but a direct strike at the regime's ability to manage itself under fire. And at the same time, the termination of the Basij commander hits an entirely different layer. Not the one that makes decisions, but the one that represses, arrests, threatens, and keeps the street under control. And that is exactly the central question of this night. Are we seeing only another successful wave of assassinations, or a deeper stage in the campaign designed to leave Tehran without a functioning leadership, without a stable repression structure, and without a real ability to close the gap? Because in one night, Israel struck both the man effectively running the state and the man effectively running the field. And that is no longer just a hit on the top echelon. It is a double blow to the brain of the regime and to its iron fist. Explosions were heard overnight in the heart of Tehran. And at those same hours, the Israeli Air Force was also operating in Shiraz and also in Tabriz. During these wave of strikes, the Naval Command and Control Center of the Revolutionary Guards was destroyed. The headquarters that for years have been responsible for targeting freedom of navigation, carrying out sabotage operations against civilian ships, and smuggling weapons to Hezbollah. The question opening day 18th of the operation, this war, Lion's Roar, or by its American name, Epic Fury, is whether we are now seeing only the Iranian erosion or the beginning of a real systematic collapse on land, at sea, in the air, and also inside the regime's command structure as well. Because what happened overnight in Tehran was not just another strike on the warehouse or another symbolic hit. This was a strike on the nerve center of the command. The naval headquarters that was destroyed sat inside a large military compound in eastern Tehran, and for years it served the senior command echelon of the Revolutionary Guards Navy. This is not a regular navy. It is a maritime terror network. It is responsible for attacks on trade routes, attacks on civilian ships, arming Iran's terror proxies, and running maritime smuggling networks that move weapons, money, and equipment to Hezbollah and to the Houthis. The IDF says that these strikes deepen the disruption of the regime's ability to advance terror plans in the maritime arena. And behind this strike was deep intelligence and other work by the Navy Intelligence Directorate, working together with other military intelligence bodies. The goal was not only to hit a building, the goal was to hit the center of gravity that holds Iran's naval picture together, a center that manages fleet activity, command, control, situation assessments, and coordination of naval operations across every large region. Once a center like this is hit, the effect does not stay inside Tehran alone. It projects outward into the Persian Gulf, into the Red Sea, and the shipping lanes the entire world is watching right now because of Hormuz. And that connects directly to the broader picture of day 18 of this war. Iran is now trying to use what it has left as a central pressure card, the sea, energy, and the ability to disrupt the global economy. But at exactly that point, Israel and the United States are hitting it at its most sensitive spot. Not just the launchers, not just the ground headquarters, also the arm responsible for harming the freedom of navigation, laying the infrastructure for maritime terror, and turning the Gulf into a trap. Alongside that strike, the Israeli campaign is also continuing in a completely different dimension: space, the center of developing anti-satellite attack capabilities that was already destroyed in Tehran is a sign that this war is no longer only about land, about air, and about sea. Israel is also targeting Iran's ability to operate in the space domain. That same center was used to develop military space programs, including the satellite Harman-1, which was launched in September 2024 by the Revolutionary Guards. The IDF has made it clear that this center poses a threat to the Israeli satellites and to the space assets of other countries as well. The significance here is much broader than it sounds at first. The moment Iran builds military space capabilities, it is not looking for prestige, it is looking for vision, collection, transmission, surveillance, tracking, and eventually also strike capabilities. So when Israel first hits the space and the satellite headquarters, then the research centers, and now also a center for developing anti-satellite attack capabilities, it is effectively cutting away from another layer of Iran's future force buildup. That is why the defense establishment keeps emphasizing the IDF's freedom of action in the space domain. Without that, it becomes much harder to fight a modern war over time. But to truly understand where we are this morning, we need to step back and look at the bigger picture. 2.5 weeks into the operation, a very clear sequence of strikes has already accumulated from the head down to the foundation. The campaign opened with a fast, deep, and precise opening blow that made it possible to eliminate dozens of senior leaders and regime figures, including Ali Khamenei. The strike targeted 3 senior centers simultaneously: the Leadership Command, the Defensive Council, the meeting of the ministry officials, the Central Iranian Intelligence Body. That was the head. From that moment, the effort shifted to the 2 main arms, the missile array and the air defensive array. More than 700 targets belonging to the missile array have already been struck. Around 70% of Iran's launchers and missiles have been taken out of use. More than 250 unmanned aerial vehicles have been struck. And at the same time, around 80% of the air defensive systems, radar systems, and surface-to-air missiles have been hit. That is exactly what has allowed the Air Force to operate deep inside Iran today, again and again, and in several cities at the same time. So I want to call on you to keep spreading the truth, share our content with as many people as possible. Make sure to hit the subscribe button on TBN Israel YouTube channel, where we create and post and upload live videos, updates, and basically share with you what's happening in Israel. If you want to see this war in Israel through our eyes, you can look for Yair Pinto and Mati Shoshani on social media platforms, so you can get the full picture of what is happening here, boots on the ground style. And now, let's get back to the picture on the ground, because after the strike on the head and on the firepower raise, the campaign entered a deeper phase, targeting industries, headquarters, and the regime's repression mechanisms. More than 100 military industry targets have been struck. More than 500 command and control targets belonging to the Revolutionary Guards, the Basij, and the internal security mechanisms have already been destroyed. And in total, more than 2,000 different targets across Iran have been struck using more than 10,000 munitions. This is no longer just a sequence of sorties. It is a systematic dismantling campaign. And that brings us back to one of the most important stories of the past few hours: cracks inside the Revolutionary Guards and inside the Basij. Overnight, strikes were reported on the security checkpoints along central routes in Tehran, including in Gelab Square, Azadi Square, Amiradbad, Yosefbad, and other inspection points, some of them under bridges. The strikes were carried out by drones, and according to the reports, the regime and their air defensive capabilities tried to intercept them and, guess what? Failed. It is important to understand what that means. These are not just interception posts. These are the checkpoints through which the regime controls the streets, stops movements, spreads fear, and monitors civilians. And the moment the swarms of drones hit those positions, the message is double. On the one hand, it is a direct blow to the repression mechanism. On the other hand, it is a severe psychological blow to the Basij forces themselves. And when there are already reports of raising the desertions, including some senior officials and officers in Isfahan and also in Tabriz, this has to be read exactly this way. The chains of command are being damaged. Discipline is cracking, and fear is gradually replacing the confidence and the repression apparatus. Signs of pressure are also visible inside the regime itself. The rift between the political echelon and also the senior commanders of the Revolutionary Guards is widening. On the one side, there are voices that want to talk, to stop, and to find a way out. And on the other side, there is demand to keep fighting, intensify the confrontation, and also prevent any appearance of weakness and prevent any appearance of losing control. That is exactly why the Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi of Iran and President Pezeshkian are being forced to publicly fall in line, even as the pressure on them is growing. And when at the same time Trump is saying, I don't know who you can talk to in Iran because everybody there is dead, he's not just delivering a jab, he's describing a situation in which even the other side is no longer fully clear on itself. And Trump, by the way, raised the level of his messaging very sharply. That happened in the last 24 hours. He said that the war would end very soon, but not this week. He said that Iran wants to talk, but still is not ready. And he said that explicitly the United States is currently rejecting another round of talks because they need more pounding. And he also is dealing with the surrender terms that Washington is demanding, handing over the enriched uranium, shutting down the nuclear facilities, stopping the missile project, ending support for regional terror organization, and ending the executions, and also ending the control above the Iranian people. So lots of stuff that he's doing, but at the same time, he's also presented a very harsh number about the scale of the strikes. So according to him, the United States and Israel have struck more than 7,000 military and commercial targets in the Islamic Republic of Iran. He claimed there has been about 90% drop in Iran's ballistic missile launches and their launch capabilities, and about 95% drop in drone attacks. He said that the Iranian Air Force has been destroyed, the Iranian Navy has lost most of its strength, and more than 100 Iranian vessels have been sunk or destroyed. Even if some of those numbers are part of an aggressive American framing of the picture of what's happening in this war, the big picture is that the Iranians were hit hard, and the direction is very clear. Washington wants to project that there is no balance here, only a systematic dismantling of the power of Iran. And in the meantime, despite all of this, Iran is still firing. But even here, the numbers show a sharp change. Since the beginning of the war, Iran has launched around 7,700 missiles, ballistic missiles at Israel. Only about 300 of them actually reached the Israeli territory. The rate of fire dropped sharply from 80 missiles on the first day to 60 on the second day to 30, and then down to a pace of 10 and also 20 missiles every single day on an average. That pace may continue for some time, but it no longer looks like the force of an enemy that can decide this war. It looks like the force of an enemy trying to harass. And this is exactly the point where we need to talk about one of the biggest challenges of recent days, the cluster missiles. These are missiles with a splitting warhead, and they have become Iran's main tool in trying to cause widespread damage, even as the pace of the fire is dropping. Instead of one heavy warhead weighing hundreds of kilograms, the missile opens at high altitude and then disperses dozens of small bombs. Each one is carrying between 2.5 and 5 kilograms of explosives, but together they create a very large explosion radius that can reach up to a square 10-kilometer radius, or even more than that, depending on the altitude of the split. And from the IDF's perspective, the main challenge is how to prevent this split from happening in the first place. This is where the Arrow system is coming in. Arrow 3 is designed to engage the missile outside of the atmosphere, outside before the warhead is opening up and splitting. If that happens, the entire fragmentation effect is essentially prevented. Arrow 2 then operates inside the atmosphere, and it is critical too, but the later the interception, the greater the danger of creating multiple impact zones instead of a single one. That is why the pressure now is to catch as many of these missiles as soon as possible outside the atmosphere before they split up to dozens of small bombs. The IDF estimates that about half of the missiles that are being launched now carry splitting warheads. That is why even with fewer launches, the threat is still being felt very strongly today here amongst the Israeli civilian population. But if there is one arena that has now become the heart of the strategic battle, it is Hormuz. Iran is enforcing a selective blockade. It is not closing the route blindly. It is blocking energy lanes. It is blocking the route of the maritime shipping lanes. It's affecting the economies of Europe and Asia while allowing passage to certain tankers only those tied to China and to India. And in doing so, it is raising prices, pressuring the markets, trying to split the coalition against it, and preserving room for maneuver for itself. And at this point, Donald Trump is pressing the world to join in. He is demanding that NATO and the countries of Europe and also Asian countries send forces like minesweepers and escort ships for convoys in the Strait. He's not hiding this anger at those who refuse. He said publicly that there are countries that the United States has protected for decades, where it has stationed tens of thousands of troops, and now that it needs help with something very small, they suddenly prefer not to get involved. Britain disappointed him. France, according to him, may help. Australia and Japan have already announced that they will not join for now. And the meaning is clear. If a broad coalition is not built, the United States will have to do the job itself. Of course, with Israeli intelligence support and quite support from the Gulf states. But this is exactly Trump's challenge. there are three options on the table. The first is escorting the tanker convoys through the strait under a shield of ships, aircraft drones, and minesweepers. And this is the most likely option, but it takes time. Preparations of at least a week and a half and 2 weeks, something like that, until the arrival of additional forces, and a third aircraft carrier to balance the burden. So the second season of Karag Island, which is Iran's main oil terminal, through which 90% of its oil exports passes. This is a very strong card, but also a very dangerous one, because it could trigger a "let me die with the Philistines" response from Tehran against the oil facilities of the Gulf states. Meaning, if I go down, everybody goes down with me. And the third is a much broader operation against the entire Iranian coast around the Strait of Hormuz and the 7 islands that dominate it. That would already be a much larger campaign with a cost and with the danger of entanglement of the United States that not sure that they want. And in the meantime, it's important to remember why Hormuz matters so much. At its narrowest point, the strait is only about 21 nautical miles wide, with 2 narrow shipping lanes for tankers. The Iranians hold a long rocky coastline, 7 islands, anti-ship missiles, fast boats, explosive boats, drones, naval mines, and underwater capabilities. Trump claims that more than 30 mine-laying vessels have already been destroyed, and that it is not at all certain that the Iranians managed to lay mines. But even he admits that if they want to, they easily can still try to use other types of vessels and turn the strait into an economic kill zone. And that also connects to another question that came up today. Why is Iran focusing so much on its attacks specifically on the United Arab Emirates? You have an answer for that? Let me know in the comments. The answer is not only militarily. The United Arab Emirates is not just another oil producer in the Gulf. It is a global hub. Dubai and Abu Dhabi are centers of trade, finance, and aviation, insurance, cargo, and international services. Jebel Ali is one of the most important ports in the world. Farjirah is a crucial center for trading and storing petroleum products on the Gulf of Oman. A strike on the Emiratis can create an immediate shock in the markets, in supply chains, in air traffic, and in decision-making circles in Washington. From Tehran's perspective, this is a perfect pressure target. It is a country with enormous economic weight, with a Western military presence, and with major symbolic value. That is why a strike there is not just fire at a target. It is a message to the whole world. If you keep pressing us, we know exactly where the global economy is most sensitive. And inside this turmoil, the internal drama in Tehran around Mustafa Khamenei is also rising. It turns out that he was almost terminated in the opening strike itself. And according to a leaked recording, he survived only because he had stepped out just a few minutes earlier for a walk in the courtyard, and the missile hit exactly as he was coming up to the stairs. His wife was terminated on the spot. Other family members were also terminated, and he himself was wounded in the leg. The fact that he still has not been seen in public since the start of this war only deepens the question marks. At the same time, more details are emerging about his very appointment. It turns out that Ali Khamenei himself did not want his son to succeed him. Before his death, he gave other names, and Mustafa was not one of them. Only the termination of the father and the atmosphere of vengeance pushed the hardliners in the regime to insist on his son. The assembly of experts, made up of 88 senior clerks, convened twice under the emergency conditions, and the final vote gave Mustafa 59 votes. But even after he was chosen, the regime debated whether to announce it immediately or to delay it, out of fear that he too will be fastly eliminated. In other words, even the man presented as the new supreme leader was actually born out of chaos, out of fear, and a deep blow to legitimacy. And in the meantime, another front is continuing to take shape: Lebanon. In recent days, Division 91 forces have begun focused ground activities in southern Lebanon, in the area of the Ramim Ridge and the El Chaim, as part of what is defined as the forward defensive missions. The stated goal is to push Hezbollah back, make it harder for the Badr unit to threaten northern Israeli communities, and expand the security zone. And at the same time, Israel is planning to destroy the first line of houses near the border and to conduct negotiations with Lebanon while the demolitions are underway. This is in order to pressure the Lebanese government to restrain Hezbollah themselves. And the Chief of Staff, Eyal Zamir, made clear that the campaign in Lebanon is not separate from the campaign in Iran. On the contrary, every blow to Iran's military buildup, armament, and funding capabilities also hurts Hezbollah. And he also gave new numbers. More than 400 Hezbollah terrorists have already been eliminated, including senior figures. The IDF is reinforcing the Northern Command and declaring that it is prepared to deepen the operation. Hezbollah, for its part, is preparing for maneuver, warfare with anti-tank fire, sabotage, guerrilla tactics, and raids. And in other words, there too, Israel is trying to manage a message and a measured move, but understanding that it cannot leave this front frozen while Iran is burning. So this is the opening day of day 18th of this war against Iran. This was a night in which Tehran was hit again. The maritime terrorist headquarters of the Revolutionary Guards were destroyed, and the pressure around Hormuz, the Strait of Hormuz, is increasing. And a morning in which more cracks can be seen inside the regime's machinery, a further drop in the pace of the Iranian fire, and more signs that Washington is not rushing towards a deal, but is preparing the ground for another blow. The question now is not just only how much power Iran has left, but whether all of this accesses, the missiles, the sea, the leadership, the street, and the proxies will begin to collapse altogether. And if that happens, will day 18th be the moment when the war stopped being only a military campaign and became a moment of decision for the regime itself? So thank you so much for being with us, and I wanted to ask you again to pray. I think the number one prayer for today should be the Iranian people, to have the strength, the courage, and the godly wisdom to know when to act, when to take back their country. Let's pray for them to have God's vision, God's peace in their hearts. Let's pray also for wisdom to our leaders, to everybody involved in the situation. Let's pray for the rest of the world to join in this battle, to help the United States and Israel against this evil regime. Let's pray for our enemies. That's a hard one, I know. But not let's pray for them to succeed in their attempts to launch rockets at us. Let's pray for them to have a change of heart and come to God. Leave all this terrorism and attempts of destruction. God can make that happen. And let's pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.